Chipped ham and football. That's what Pittsburgh does. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Brian Batko back with you from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of our triumvirate of Steelers beat writers. We are officially one day away from report day for training camp 2024 for this team. So what better time to take the national pulse of the franchise, and who better to do it with than one of the absolute heaviest hitters in NFL media, Ian Rapoport from NFL Network. Should be a really fun show today, as always, presented by Pella. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and your budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Okay, let's get into this conversation with Rap Sheet on the other side. Thanks so much for tuning in. Ian Rapoport, folks, there he is. To borrow a Mike Tomlin phrase, he needs no introduction from me. If you've heard of me, I'm quite sure you've heard of him. Really appreciate you joining us on Report Day Eve. We are recording this on Monday. It'll be posted Tuesday, so knock on wood. No major developments, but how's it going, Ian?
I'm good. I'm ready to get back into it, for better or worse, as football is apparently upon us. So let's go.
Yeah, and there's already been teams out there getting into their training camps. We'll be at Latrobe tomorrow, and then throughout the weekend. So the sweltering summer heat is here. But a lot of times on this show, when we have on national reporters or analysts, I like to take a step back, look at the Steelers from a mile away, and basically go a bit wider than deeper. And for me, it seems like anecdotally, whenever I stumble onto a league-wide podcast or read something ranking teams or whatever, people talk about how the Ravens can win it all. What do the Bengals need to do to bounce back? Or even whether the Browns are legit contenders. Then it's like, well, you also have the Steelers. They'll probably win 9 or 10 games because that's just what they do. Where do you come down on that perspective, Ian, and what vibes do you get around the league about what people think of this team in 2024?
Well, Steelers really are a curiosity, and I think they have been, I would say it's fair to say in the post-Ben era, they've sort of been, every year it's been like, well, yeah, they got some pieces, but like, what can they turn that into? We'll see. I think that's kind of been the vibe, and unless and until you have the, Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, you just mentioned those teams, unless you have one of those guys, then every year it's kind of like that. And I think one thing the Steelers have taught us is that basically every year, or just every year in general, they're going to be 500 or better, and they're going to threaten to make the playoffs. Will they get in? We don't know. Will they win a game or two? We don't know, but they're always going to be in position. And I would say this year is similar. I mean, they got, really solid roster. I think they have a defense that's going to be really good. They have an offensive line that is being rebuilt, and you sort of think the draft this year should go a long way. Not just Fatano, but Frazier as well should go a long way in sort of solidifying that. It's really just how far can the quarterback take them, and which quarterback does it end up being? And I think as people like me visit Latrobe, and I will be there at some point.
Sweet.
In August, I think it's how far does the quarterback take him, and who does it end up being? That's probably going to be the biggest thing, not just in training camp, but really the entire season.
If you can transport yourself back to, I guess it would have been mid to late March, and then some more things percolating with the Kenny Pickett trade situation. I mean, what were the feelers you put out around the league? I mean, what was the sense of the Steelers coming to the Russell Wilson? I guess you could call it a sweepstakes, but it's almost more of like somebody left a big TV out for the yard sale that may or may not still work, and the Steelers were kind of the first ones there to pick it up. I mean, did people look at that with a skeptical eye, or was that just good business from Omar to take a stab with very little risk and potentially high reward if he's still got something left in the tank?
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely both, because it's essentially free for the Steelers, right? I mean, it is a free starting quarterback. The Broncos are paying almost all of it. I think there was a couple different things, considered. I think if you're Russell Wilson, a long-term deal probably would have been preferred, like everyone. But like, how do you actually find the price, and what's that going to be? I mean, if you were guaranteeing that he was going to be a starter this entire year and make the playoffs, well, then the contract is not that hard. If you go into the, training camp with some uncertainty, as the Steelers and Russell Wilson do and does, then I think a 1-year minimum deal makes the most sense. So some deals are hard to negotiate. This one was literally just like, you good, we're good. Like, okay, and this was a reunion or a union that always made sense. Steelers have a need, and you could sort of tell Mike Tomlin has always had an eye for Russell Wilson. I think this really made sense. So when it happened at 11:53 at night, when Russell Wilson kind of shook everyone up and I think surprised everyone with the timing and just announced it, including Kenny Pickett, just announced it himself, I think it started them down the road of like, all right, well, let's just see what this ends up being.
And then the Justin Fields factor came in not too long after. And, it'll be really interesting to hear from him this first week of training camp and kind of how he assesses this circumstance, behind Russ, but also trying to compete. I thought it was interesting that this is where he ended up, and it took the Kenny Pickett trade for that to happen. Were you surprised at all that, a different opportunity didn't arise for him, or that somebody didn't bid up a little bit more just for the raw tools and talent that maybe can still be harnessed going into year 4?
I was not surprised at the landing spot, and this is always the one that made the most sense to me. One, because, by the time you get to, if I remember correctly, Justin Fields was traded on the Saturday after free agency. I'm almost positive because it was my son's 9th birthday party that I had to race out of when I got a cryptic phone call and ended up sending the tweet, like standing in the parking lot.
Yeah, it was a Saturday because I was definitely sitting out on the back deck, not expecting to have to do any work that evening myself.
I was in the same boat. Now, I knew this trade could happen, but figuring out when and figuring out the price is always hard. And, I think Justin Fields has been pretty outspoken, but the Bears did him a solid. My guess is they could have, first of all, if they traded him earlier, they absolutely could have gotten more. But they wanted to take their time, make sure he had a good landing spot, and make sure they did as much work on Caleb Williams as they needed to. Like, that was the emphasis, rather than like, all right, how do we maximize Justin Fields? Can we get a 3 or a 4 for him if we do it early? Like, they wanted to get Caleb Williams right, which is, I think, why it took some time. I mean, if it was done in February or something like that, they for sure could have gotten more when there were more suitors.
Sure.
But by this time, there were basically no suitors. It was just the Steelers, because everyone else either had eyes on a rookie quarterback or had signed someone else in free agency. I think that's what made the price what it was. Now, I will say this for Justin Fields. You guys will talk to him at some point this week. He is going to compete. Like, he is. I know what, Mike Tomlin has said. Russell Wilson is in pole position, all of that. Justin Fields is going to compete, and wherever that ends up, that ends up.
Yeah, I'll just be curious to see how many chances he gets to do so. I think back to Kenny Pickett's rookie year a couple years ago. I mean, much of the same was said for him, and Mitch Trubisky pretty much held that spot wire to wire because of Mike Tomlin's comfort there with the free agent signing. So it's not quite apples to apples, but upper hand for Russ, and we will see what happens. Strange things can happen in training camp, whether injuries or whatever else. But moving beyond the quarterbacks, I mean, let's frame it this way: taking Russ Fields' situation out of the mix, what to you, Ian's been the biggest storyline for the Steelers this offseason? Is it the Arthur Smith hiring to right that ship? Is it another Mike Tomlin extension, or is there something else that comes to mind for you that kind of defined these last few months for them?
Well, it's funny, like the Mike Tomlin extension, I think when we all saw that, I was like, all right, makes sense, because, it had been very clear that he was coming back, and I'm still not entirely sure kind of like where and how the Tomlin might step away rumors started. I guess every year we sort of hear them. Right.
I think just every year you do this job, right? Every year you do it, you get closer to not doing it. So that's how I always view it.
And I think what ends up happening is everyone who wants jobs, or everyone who knows people or represents people or whatever that want jobs, it's in all their best interest for everyone to talk about all the jobs that could be available. So I think Tomlin gets sort of wrapped up in that. I would just say, like, for me, he's going to have a Steelers job as long as he wants, as he should. And I don't know. At some point, it's the end for everyone. And at some point, Mike Tomlin will know. I just haven't sensed him like losing energy or losing patience or not liking it as much. Like those are the things you sort of can sense. But with Tomlin, I don't get any of it. So I was not surprised he got an extension. Not surprised he's back. I think the Arthur Smith thing probably is, the biggest for two reasons. One, I think Arthur Smith is going to be a very, very good head coach. I think had the quarterback situation been better for him in Atlanta, and like he takes ownership of that as well. Like he was part of the decision making. So do not get me wrong. Like this is on everyone there, not just him. They rolled with Desmond Ridder and he wasn't the answer. It's what it is. I think he's going to be a very good head coach. And I think a year or two as a coordinator will help. He was one of the best coordinators in the NFL when he was doing this job in Tennessee. And I think this is going to help immensely. I think it will be, I think by the end, the Kenny Pickett situation resolved itself in a way where all sides were kind of like, all right,
rip the Band-Aid off. Yeah.
That is a fine outcome for all. New quarterback, new coordinator. I think it's probably a good place to be for the Steelers.
Yeah, we'll see with Arthur Smith. I mean, that'd be great for both sides if he uses this as a springboard to another head coaching opportunity. That'll mean he obviously had some success here coordinating the offense. And, for him, it'll mean, another crack at that after what happened in Atlanta. And the Tomlin thing is so interesting that, you say well-deserved. There's always pushback from the fans who want one of those playoff wins that they haven't seen in 7-8 years. So, I mean, is it a case of just the national media viewing it differently than the local media or the local fans who have that standard so high, whereas they're not necessarily paying attention to the other 31 teams and some of the dysfunction that can pop up at times that, maybe you take for granted here in Pittsburgh?
Well, there is definitely a disconnect nationally and locally. And I don't know that it's the media, because it's like, in a lot of ways, media represents fans, right? So like,
we're the go-between, the conduit
right.
for what
so
they're
like,
feeling. Yeah.
The fans expect playoff wins. And so when the media sort of asks questions or speaks to that, it's not like the media wants playoff wins. I mean, I've been in local media. It's by the end of the season, you're basically like, whatever happens. I'm tired. Like,
right.
Was for me. It's like the fans expect playoff wins. And I think for the national media or the national perspective, not just media, but national fans, it's really just the overall respect for how insanely hard it is to get there every single year. Yes, more playoff wins would be better. But the Steelers went through a massive transition, a kind of under the radar transition because they were never bad. But the kind of transition where most teams would be bad for a couple of years. You let your high-priced guys go. You change quarterbacks. You change coordinators. The offensive line reboots itself. The defense reboots itself. All your top guys get paid and then want more money. It's all the things that really good teams go through. And the Steelers went through all of it. And I think now are kind of coming out the other end. But they did it while also winning. So, like, to take credit away from the fact that they've maintained like this, even while having a, serious transition, everyone should understand how incredibly hard that was.
And it speaks to the stability of the Steelers front office as well, for better or worse, that you talked about all those transitions, Ian, and didn't even mention GM. They went from Kevin Colbert to Omar Khan, who was his right-hand man for the longest time. Does anything strike you so far in Omar's 2 years and change on the job as being different than the way Kevin ran things? Or do you hear anything about the way he operates that kind of, jumps out to you from these last couple seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I think Omar Khan has done a really nice job the last couple of years. I think, the drafts will speak for itself. I mean, look, might they have drafted my favorite player in the draft and an old wrestler turned center? Maybe they did. I don't know.
Good old Zach Frazier from in our backyard here in Morgantown.
Was 151-2. Was his. I mean, one of my favorite players in the draft. Whatever. I'm not biased. I think that was awesome. But hopefully he's as good as all the offensive line coaches.
Keanu Benton was a high school wrestler as well, so I know people are looking forward to their one-on-ones at Chuck Knoll Field out there at St. Vincent College. They might actually end up on the ground. They might have to put a mat out for those two.
They might. I mean, that would actually be truly fun, especially in the dog days of training camp. Like any, sort of disruption is fun. So count me in on that. But I think with Omar, he has been more willing to take chances, more willing to make trades, more willing to give up a draft pick for a player he wants or a player who can fit in. And have they all worked out? Definitely not. But that's kind of what today's NFL is about, is saying there's a price for something. I like it. I'm going to take a leap. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. We'll make the next trade or next move or next signing, because there's just a group of, younger sort of GMs now who aren't it's not like they embrace the risk, but they are okay with it. And I think Omar Khan is like that. So he's been a little more daring and creative than Kevin Colbert was. And I think today's NFL probably demands that.
Yeah, and I think even Kevin himself would probably tell you, he wasn't the most analytically minded GM. He used it at times, but, that was kind of the modernization of the game that he saw as his tenure wound down, and he was kind of ready to, pass the torch to someone else. All right, Ian, I want to end on this. Hopefully won't put you on the spot or catch you too off guard here, but in all your years doing this, since you've been at NFL Network and covering the whole league, what's been maybe the strangest interaction or exchange or development you've covered when it comes to this team in our fine city of Pittsburgh? Is there one sort of Steelers anecdote that you have that has been weird or bizarre in any way?
I would say, let's see. So early on in my career, really early, I reported a bunch of stuff on Big Ben. And it was, the team was like 1-5, and he was real upset. And he was, to my knowledge, kind of venting to people who were close to him. And, I came out with a series of reports basically about his, about his discontent. Right. And then sort of internal wondering, like, where's this going to go? And it was a really good introduction for me as a young reporter who thought he knew everything. That when you report something on a starting quarterback of a team whose fans care greatly, the reaction is going to be immense. And I think now, I could, report anything now and probably tell you what the reaction is going to be. But the way that blew up, and this was probably before your time, but the way that blew up was really a good lesson for me in like, all right, like if you report something, you got to be ready for all of it. And that's kind of what, the NFL has gotten so big and intense and awesome now that that's the way it is. But I think for me as a young reporter, that was a really good lesson to understand all sides of something, including the reaction before you report it.
Yeah. I want to say that would have been maybe 2013 around there. I was living here. I was in college, and I wasn't following the daily goings on of the Steelers, let alone
it was
media.
I think it was 2013. That seems right, because I think it would have been my second year at NFL Network. So I think that's
and they had some rough starts around that time too that might have precipitated that. So, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, the Steelers have been one of those buttoned up franchises, as you know, they're going to be on Hard Knocks and down the stretch run. I feel like they're either going to be the most authentic, like Mike Tomlin is going to just be letting it fly on that, or they are going to be the least. They are going to be the most conservative, not let anything real and genuine trickle out of there.
When one interesting thing about that is it's all division rivals.
Yeah.
So it's not like, well, if we let people in, then like our opponents are going to get a advantage. Like everyone's doing it. So that takes away sort of the like, well, we don't want to let you in because we don't want people to find out. It's like, well, actually, Ravens are doing this, Bengals are doing it. So I think it's going to be cool. I've loved the Giants one. That has been to me my favorite one I've seen ever. I hope it encourages teams to be more transparent, because like, is there going to be negative? Like probably, but it lets the world know what these guys do and what they're actually like. And as someone who happens to like a lot of the Steelers people, including Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith and all the way down the line, Terrell and everyone, like I hope they let people in because it's a pretty good group.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks so much to Ian Rapoport for taking this time. One of the busiest men in NFL media, if not number one with a bullet. Anything you want to plug or promote before I let you get out of here? You got the new podcast going, right?
Insiders. We got the Insiders. Our show is on primetime now on NFL Network 7 to 8. Please watch. And then we got Inside Training Camp coming up. I leave for my trip starting Wednesday. So pray for no flight disruptions. And I can't wait.
And I will see you in Latrobe when you're there. I will certainly come say hi and we can spend some time. Yeah, in person instead of over here. Thanks again to Rap Sheet. Appreciate everybody for finding Chipped Ham and football here. I'm Brian Batko from the Post-Gazette. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.